There's a moment in every creator's journey where everything starts to connect. Not in a loud, obvious way, but quietly, almost invisibly, like pieces of a puzzle finally locking into place. And suddenly the confusion that once surrounded fair use begins to dissolve, replaced by something sharper, something more controlled. Because now you're not just reacting to the system, you're anticipating it, thinking ahead, seeing patterns before they even fully form. And this is where the real shift happens. You stop treating fair use as a boundary and start seeing it as a design principle, something that shapes how you build your content from the ground up, influencing your structure, your pacing, your storytelling, your voice, and even the type of ideas you choose to pursue. Because now every concept is filtered through a deeper question. Can I make this uniquely mine? That question changes everything, because it forces you to move beyond surface-level inspiration, beyond simply following what's trending, and into a space where your content is driven by perspective rather than availability, where you're no longer asking, "What can I use?" but "What can I say?" And that shift transforms your role from a collector of clips into a creator of meaning. But here's where it becomes even more interesting. You begin to realize that the safest content isn't necessarily the content that avoids reuse, but the content that controls it, that uses it with precision, intention, and purpose. Where every borrowed element is clearly serving your narrative, your analysis, your message, and nothing exists without a reason, and that level of control creates clarity, not just for you, but for anyone evaluating your work. At the same time, your editing style evolves again, becoming more deliberate, more structured, because now you understand that how long a clip plays, how often it's interrupted, how it's framed within your commentary. All of these details influence how your content is perceived, and perception, as you've learned, is everything. You also start to recognize the importance of timing, not just in terms of pacing, but in terms of presence, making sure your voice enters early, establishes context, and remains consistent throughout, so that the viewer never forgets who is guiding the experience, and that continuous presence reinforces your role as the creator, not just the editor. And then comes a deeper realization that your voice itself is your strongest form of transformation, because while clips can be reused, perspectives cannot. Your interpretation, your analysis, your way of explaining something is uniquely yours, and the more you lean into that, the less dependent your content becomes on external material. But with this growth also comes a new kind of responsibility, because now you understand the system well enough to push boundaries intelligently, and that means you have to decide how far you're willing to go, how much risk you're willing to take, and whether short-term gains are worth long-term stability, and these decisions define not just your content, but your entire trajectory as a creator. There's also a subtle but powerful change in how you view mistakes, because instead of seeing them as failures, you start seeing them as feedback, signals that help you refine your approach, adjust your strategy, and improve your understanding, and that mindset turns every challenge into an opportunity to grow stronger. And as you continue to build, something else begins to happen. Consistency, not just in uploads, but in quality, in structure, in identity. Because now you're not experimenting randomly, you're following a system you've developed, a way of creating that aligns with both your goals and the environment you're working in. Because at this stage, fair use is no longer something you think about constantly. It becomes part of your instinct, something that guides your decisions without slowing you down, something that allows you to create freely while still maintaining awareness. And that balance is what most beginners never reach. And that's what makes this moment so important. Because you've moved beyond confusion, beyond fear, beyond guesswork, into a space where you understand not just what you're doing, but why you're doing it. And that understanding is what gives your content strength, clarity, and direction. Because in the end, the goal was never just to stay safe, it was to become better, to evolve into a creator who doesn't rely on borrowed value, but builds their own. Someone who doesn't just follow trends, but interprets them, reshapes them, and turns them into something new, something meaningful, something that truly belongs to them. And once you reach that level, you realize something powerful. That fair use was never the obstacle. It was the path. A path that forced you to think deeper, create smarter, and ultimately become a creator who doesn't just survive in the system, but understands it well enough to thrive.